All right, so the next year of Siege Esports is right around the corner, and today I'm going to be talking about all about the season kickoff. So I'm going to go over all the regions today, so it's going to be a pretty long video, um, but that's how I want to do it, just kind of like an unscripted, kind of unedited, just discussion about everything. Of course, some things and teams are going to be talked about more than others just because for a couple reasons. Um, just knowledge. Like, I don't really know anything about certain teams from certain regions, particularly the lesser known regions, or we have a new region, China, but like I don't know much about the Chinese region outside of the teams, and a lot of the teams that nobody even knows the rosters for. So like, we'll talk about those regions, but they're definitely going to be like kept more brief. We might just be like, hey, here are the teams in this region, here are the rosters, and that's kind of it basically. Whereas, other regions that I know much more about and we know much more about, and also just more popular in general, can definitely get more in depth to. We'll go all into, expectations, the roster changes. We'll talk about the group stages and maybe even like playoff prediction, not predictions, projections. So, yeah, to start, I believe we have China. Um, so, yeah, for China, there's supposed to be 10 teams in this league, but I only have four here to talk about now because like we kind of know what the roster is at least. So we're just gonna briefly go through these. So um, some people may have seen these teams compete in the SI quals last year, um, but that's really it if you watch those. Besides that, these are very unfamiliar teams. But what's important about China, and we'll get into that after we go through these teams, is the major spots. So we have Kingzone, and this is their roster. And then Tyloo, definitely a familiar org. If you're a Counter Strike watcher, you probably know who Tyloo are there. And then we have Four Angry Men, and they don't even have a fifth listed, but they were one of the more relevant teams in China last year. So I decided to still include them. Um, but yeah, no idea who their fifth player is. And then we have All Gamers, probably like the most known team in China right now, right? They were made the final of the SI qual, but didn't end up making it. So, but this team is definitely like probably the most promising team coming out of China, and they're probably like a shoe into the major. Plus, they have like they have Phenomene, who's been around the scene and other teams as coaches. I think most recently, before All Gamers, I believe he was with Oxygen, and then MC was their player. I believe played for Elevate previously in the Asia League at one point. Um, and then yeah, also you'll recognize some of their other players, Moonlight, Railgun, Solo Mid. If you watched any of the SI qualifiers for APAC at the end of last year, so this is the team that I know most about and kind of expect to be at the upcoming major. And then yeah, this is what I talk. This is why China is important because they get four major spots. So like Ubisoft has really invested into this into China as a region because like China gets four major spots, and then the rest of APAC as a whole. So APAC North, Asia League, and Oceania get a total of four major spots between them. So it's like pretty crazy, but I kind of get it, right? Because UB really wants to push the Chinese, to the Chinese audience, and they want people from China playing the game. So they're offering up a lot of major spots. But yeah, I really feel like there's definitely going to be some not so good teams at the major because of this. I feel like the only like somewhat competitive team um, that I've seen from China will be All Gamers, and maybe for Angry Men they were pretty solid. It's seemingly so. Yeah. Next, we're gonna go Europe Meta League. So we got a lot more to talk about here. So our first team coming out of Challenger League is the X Team Secret Academy roster. It's a full French team. Alems is back in Pro League, as well as Asa, who was previously with Wolves, and Alems, of course, previously had a long stint on BDS, including winning what is now EWC, and won the Yanshiping Major with BDS, and now he's back. He's grinded through Challenger League with this new young French squad. So definitely just kind of a prospect team here led by some veteran leadership in Alems. So I think it's cool to see that he's back, and he's brought a bunch of fresh talent into the European pool. And our next team through Challenger League is Team Heretics. Now, you might look at this team and be like, wait, no, this isn't Team Heretics, because Team Heretics was at Six Invitational, and this is not Team Heretics roster that compete at Six Invitational. Well, the team here at Heretics roster that competed in at Six Invitational also competed in Challenger League. However, the team that competed in Challenger League decided after their Six Invitational run, which I mean they didn't really have many expectations for anyways, outside of maybe make it out of the groups. After that SI run, they decided it would be a good idea before Challenger League to change their coach and a player out. And that didn't work out. They ended up losing Challenger League and their org to the team that beat them. So rough day in the office for the old Team Heretics guys, but great for this new team. And I feel like you have to really look out for because this is basically the old Mako roster, right? Akwi, Lalo, and Dora, right? They were all on Mako, and then it's still a full Italian team, but they picked up some younger talent here, which I really like. They have Reese, who is definitely one of the more hyped up prospects, I think, this year for his skill. And then, I'm sorry if I butcher this, but Zarami or Zarami, I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm going to be honest. But yeah, both like young up and comers coming into this team to bolster their more veteran backline. So yeah, basically, this is the old Mako team with a couple changes. And of course, they're now under Heretics, much bigger org. So great support for them. And yeah, now we have Geeke. So I think if you watch Siege in the past few years, you might remember Geeke. They've made some majors before through qualification spots when we had the old just separate Meta League before they combined it into EU Meta League. And Geeke bought out, I don't know which spot they bought, but they bought out one of Genji's or Mako's like Pro League spots, which is why they're here. And they have Hungary is back in Pro League somehow. The only way he got back in Pro League was he got an org that had enough money to buy the spot in. And then we have Packbull as well. It's definitely an interesting team here because there's like a lot of players. There's like 3 guys on here who are all like have been IGLs at some point in their career for like different teams, and I definitely feel like they'll be very like interesting. I feel like the strats for this team and could be really really good. I think they have some good minds behind this team. And then they also have Rexon or Rex Hun, not Rexin, Rex Hun, who was definitely one of the more hyped up players in last year's Challenger League, but he never got picked up to a pro team. He ended up staying on this Geeke roster, and yeah, now he actually is in Pro League because Geeke got one of the spots. And they also have Sarks, who was previously with Fnatic. Definitely one of the, I would say, the few bright spots on Fnatic's roster last year. And they also got Ask from Brazil, who previously on Black Dragons, and then previously with Liquid, and previously but with Black Dragons, and then previously with Liquid. So definitely an interesting career path for Ask. Now heading over to the Europe Meta League, and then they also have another. I believe they have a Brazilian head coach. So the Brazilian head coach trend continues. So next we have Twisted Minds, a roster that um, did not make Pro League last year, even though they were in Challenger League and were one of the favorites. Um, they but they stuck with the team. The org stuck with the team, and they were also just seemingly offered a spot to buy one of the spots, and that's what they did. They bought one of the affiliate spots in the league, one of Genji's or Mako's spots, and I'm glad they are here because they have previously shown to be like a quite competitive team in the past. And I'm not 100% certain on their roster because they have 6 people listed, at least on Wikipedia. Um, I'm certain it's like the top 5, like is their main roster. JLad, Hashom, Dove, Guards, and P9. I'm sure is their like main 5. They also have Key listed on there. They don't have him listed as a sub though, but I think he's a sub. And then Mad Skills is their coach, who has previously, been a player with this team as well. And they also have Little, a Brazilian assistant coach slash analyst, I would assume. So nice to see them back. And I think everyone expected this, right? Because when they dropped out of Challenger League, and everyone was like, "Why would you drop out?" Right? You're like one of the favorites to win, and I feel like most people figured out pretty quickly. It was like, "Oh yeah, they just got one of the spots, the vacant spots that needed to be filled without even having to play the CL." So EU's definitely like pretty interesting this year, right? Because we have 4 brand new teams coming in, um, and pretty much all of them were technically in Challenger League before this, even though a lot of them are like previous tier 1 players. But we do have some new guys coming in as well. So next we have Fnatic. They definitely made less changes to their roster than I thought they would, to be honest. Um, they brought back Wizard, Cruxon, and Deepak. Um, I definitely like bringing back Wizard and Cruxon. I think they were both, they have a lot more to give to this team. I feel like a lot of people are down in the Deepak stock. I still believe in him. Um, I don't think he's done. And then they brought in Huava. Again, sorry if I mispronounced the names. He was with Panahone, the Finnish Challenger League team. That also, I believe, played at the Spoit Invitational last year in Toronto. And then they brought in Deadshot, of course, previously with Genji and then Wolves before that. So, yeah, I think the biggest thing here that irks people about this roster is they brought back Shathis again as head coach, and Fnatic and previously Koi slash Rogue ever since Shathis has been like head coach of these teams. No matter who's been on it, they've never been good. I mean, really, ever since they lost Boyd, it's never been good. But I feel like it's been even worse with Shathis. So definitely, like he has a lot to prove to pretty much everyone that um, um, yeah, because I feel like yes, you can blame bad performance behind on the players, of course, because they are the ones in the server at the end of the day. But it also comes down to coaching, and if the team is consistently bad with the same coach, like year in year out, it's you have to look at the coach and be like, okay, what's going on over here, right? Because clearly something in the team isn't working, or multiple things aren't working, and your system probably is not helping. Um, so definitely an interesting decision, I think, for a lot of people, including for me. He's got a this team in general has a lot to prove, particularly the staff. I'm looking at you, Shatus. So yeah, next we have shifters. They haven't announced their roster change yet. I feel like everyone knows it's gonna be Blaz though, right? Like it's kind of obvious. He had an excellent year last year with G2, and I honestly didn't really think G2 would make roster changes. I thought they would just like continue to build on what they had, but they made roster changes. So Blaz is now with shifters, and also if you don't recognize shifters from last year, right? Because the last time this team played was at the Munich Major when they were still BDS. So they rebranded. Now they're called Shifters, and they changed their logo. So, but it's BDS. So yeah, from what I know, they made one change, which is the Blaz edition. So yeah, and then Virtus Pro, I think this is probably one of the teams I'm most excited to watch in the EU this year because they've pulled the trigger and gone to an international roster. Um, so they still have Dan and Pasha, which were definitely, they've been the standout players for this team for like the longest time now. Um, and they were like the two shining spots when the team was struggling last year. Um, they brought in Skies and Nako from Gen G, who were probably, the two best players on Gen G. I believe Nako's the IGL for Virtus Pro. I'm going to have to check on that. I believe he was also the IGL for Gen G. And then they brought Rorik over, who has been like another long time T2 talent who's been, I feel like, looked at for a long time, particularly to join this team because he is a Russian player, and the Russian talent pool is not very deep in Siege. So like I think a lot of people initially thought Virtus Pro were going to stick with the Russian team. So like Rorik was like a shoe-in already. They decided to not go with the full Russian team again and go international, but they got Rorik anyways. But that's nice to see. And then Rorik was previously on Geek as well. So he definitely has a good amount of experience coming into this team. So I'm excited to see him play. And then Always is still on the team, but as a sub, or I don't know, maybe like an analyst. Maybe he'll step into like an analyst role. But yeah, he's like on the team, but he's not on the main roster. And then they brought in Dark, previously the FearX head coach, and I really like that change because I think he really brought that previous FearX roster to like just new heights that they never really would have reached without him. Like he made them much better than anyone ever really thought they would be. Next, Team Secret. So this is definitely one of the big shakeups here in EU as well. Pretty much every team had big shakeups, to be honest. But like this is one of the huge ones, right? Because the Team Secret were probably the number 2 team last year outside of FaZe. I think you can say, and they've lost. Joom, of course, is gone. Probably everyone's. How would I say? Like, between him and Noah, their touted best player, like by far, one of the best players in the world last year, along with Noah. And then they also lost Adrian, who's just been, again, he was also ranked in the top 20 players last year. Not my personal ranking. I think for me, Adrian was probably more of like a top 15, to be honest. Maybe even top 10. But yeah, they just lost 2 like very key pieces. And they're bringing Citizen and Nafe, 2 proven players who they can definitely, fit into their system. which I think is good. So I still think this team is definitely going to be, competitive, though I doubt they'll be, as good as they were last year. It's going to take them some time to build, but there's no doubt, right, that Citizen is a really good player. And since Nafe is not IGLing this team, right, I feel like Nafe's IGLing stocks have really dropped after what happened with Dark Zero. But Nafe isn't IGLing this team; it's Savage, and I remember Nafe on Dark Zero before he, when he was there with Canadian, and he was, the team still wasn't, they were good. That Dark Zero team was pretty good. They still weren't winning anything, but they were a consistent, top 8, top 4 team at most events, and Nafe was playing individually quite well. So I definitely like the changes given the situation for Secret, right? Like the players, Adrian and Joom decided to leave. Like Secret didn't drop them. They just explored different options. So yeah, I feel like Secret really did the best they could here with these pickups, and I still think they'll be quite a strong team. And they also added an analyst. Um, so yeah. Next we have Falcons. So this is probably the biggest one of the biggest shakeups we've ever seen, right? They let go of Shaiko. You know, Shaiko is a player who I thought with this roster this was his like do or die roster. Like I thought when Shaiko's career is over, he's retiring with this team, right? I never thought he would leave, or him, Bride, and Licky Fack would go their separate ways. And I thought those three would always stick together, to be honest. And I feel like most people thought that way too. But it's just crazy. So they let go of Shaiko, already a proven, generational player. Definitely some questions about Shaiko showing up in those big games, but he's helped this team, get to the position, put them in the position to win. Like countless times, he's gotten them to so many finals, and this team has won finals, whether it was with their previous roster with Renshiro and Alems, or the current their technically not their current roster, but the roster right before this, where they had Chaiko instead of June, where they did win the EWC, and they got all those second places or third places. Very consistent results. Yes, struggling to win um, when it mattered the most, but still an excellent team. But yeah, definitely a huge change. June coming in, I feel like the fit is pretty good, right? You're swapping out one of the your franchise best players for one of the best rising players still. I feel like June still can get even better, right? I feel like that's the biggest thing for Falcons here, right? I feel like Shaiko, like his career, like or at least individually, skill wise, he's already kind of peaked. Where I feel like a lot of people think Joom, including myself, I feel like Joom can get even better than he is, right? So that's like the big upside for Falcons here for this change. I feel like going into the stage, Falcons, it's pretty much first place or bust, make the major, and then win the major. I mean that's the goal for this team. It always has been, right? That's why they're making this change, because they felt like they were just destined to never win with the previous roster, which is why they made this change in the first place. So now, of course, we have G2, who again, after last year's roster change, adding Stompin, I didn't think it would get any more ridiculous with the roster changes. But now they brought Shaiko in probably one of the craziest buyouts that Siege has ever seen. If his contract was bought out, I believe it was, though I don't actually know that. So yeah, now G2 has Shaiko. Like this roster is just like, it sounds like insane. I remember watching in a Jinxie stream, what, 2 years ago, Shaiko play against Stompin on a controller. Like, it's just ridiculous. And now they play for the same, like, what? They play for the same team in Pro League? Like, it just sounds ridiculous. Um, but yeah, definitely an interesting change, right? Because I'm assuming this is going to be the diamond, then what the new team, right? Because there's big rumors, right, that Lyra wanted to get rid of Alamau, um, but Alamau found out, right, of course. And then again, I don't know if any of this is true. This is just, I'm regurgitating what I've heard around the scene. So yeah, Lyra wanted to get rid of Alamau. Alamau said, "No, you're not getting rid of me," and then they got rid of Lyra. But even though Lyra wanted to stay with G2, um, and it wasn't true that he actually wanted to go back to Brazil because he was like homesick. And then Blaz just got dropped, kind of unfortunately. He kind of gets scapegoated. I feel bad for him, bro. Um, but I mean, hey, I mean, you got dropped. Both Lyra got dropped for Shaiko. It's like getting dropped for Shaiko is like getting traded for like Kevin Durant. It feels like. I mean, you kind of gotta feel good because at least, like, you didn't get dropped for someone who's just like a total unknown factor, right? You got replaced by, who many people see as like one of the greatest of all time, um, or at least, one of the players with, the best resume of all time, best stats, right? So yeah, and then for Blaz, um, gets replaced by Benjamaster. So this is like the big thing for G2, right? G2 brought in two new fraggers and they replaced one fragger. They're more, lurk guy, Loira, right? They made a pretty good change there. Loira for Benjamaster. They kind of fill that role one for one. Benja a bit different play style than Loira, but I still like the change. And Benjamaster, of course, previously won the SI with G2 before he was replaced in a change that I never thought really made sense in the first place. Um, right? Like, I never really liked it when Benja was replaced on this team. It just never made sense to me, that change. Of course, without that change, we would have never gotten Loira on G2, which I really like that change as well because I was a big fan of Loira when he was playing in Brazil under Black Dragons, um, when he was on his come up, right? So it's like, you know, it's funny how things work, right? If G2 don't drop Benjamaster initially, they never get Loira, and then if they don't get Loira, right, you know, how things shake up, right? Who knows what the roster would have looked like, and if they never had Loira, would they have ever gotten Benja back? And now Benja's back. Um, I feel like it's a pretty one for one role swap between him and Loira, so I feel like that's a good change. Um, it's still gonna hurt to not see Loira there because, like, I feel like, you know I enjoyed his play, but he definitely, I feel like a lot of people could say, his play definitely was more like figured out later at the end of the year. Like, he was certainly not as effective as he was at the start of the year. When you look at, how his performances at stage one in EWC, and then his performances later on in the year, particularly at SI. Um, Still not like terrible performances, but definitely like the consistency wasn't there like it was at the start of the year. Like, it felt like at the start of the year, like he was like so consistent, like he was just dominating every team. Um, and then yeah, end of the year it was just kind of struggled, especially against the better teams who knew how to game plan around it. Um, but yeah, now the Shaiko change, so they got rid of Blaz, playing a more supportive role, and they got Shaiko. Shaiko's never played support in his life, and he ain't playing support for this team, so it's gonna cause role changes in this team. Even though is it it's going to be interesting, right? Because I feel like Stompin was kind of playing a supportive role at times, and other times he could also step into that frag role, and he still can do that. But I feel like Stompin's going to be even more of like the backline role for this team now, like um, stay as the mailbox player, and kind of be like almost like the NJR of this team, I would imagine. And Alamau is sticking with the shields probably in the hard breach and the support, because there's no way I see Doki, Shaiko, and Benjamaster playing support. They can play flex, all three of them probably fine, but no, those three are not playing support. So on paper, right? This team is very good, right? This is like a team that can is built to lift trophies, but there's still the questions with the fit of the Shaiko edition, right? There's no question about his skill as a player, but will it fit? And this is also crazy, right? Like just seeing Shaiko in a G2 jersey feels like cursed, with at least with Shaiko's previous history with previous iterations of G2. The Pengu iteration, right? Everybody knows Shaiko's history with Pengu, and I know it's kind of like a narrative, right? It's not really Pengu. It's just Pengu was just kind of the guy that took the the blunt of that story, even though there's a lot more people involved than just him. So it just feels like completely insane that this roster exists. But yeah, so these are the groups for EU MENA League. I'm gonna be honest, the both these groups, I feel like you're looking at G2 and Falcons are in separate groups, so you're like they should definitely both be getting first in these groups. I'm definitely excited for when G2 play Virtus Pro in the groups, and then Falcons versus Secret will also be fun because they traded players, or they didn't trade players, but Secret's best player went to Falcons, and then yeah. So these are going to be our groups. The group stage matches will be best of ones, and the top 4 teams in each group will all make the playoffs. The first place teams get a bye. The number 2 and 3 teams get upper bracket, and the 4th place team gets lower bracket, as you see here. And then the 9th and 10th, the 5th place team in each group will not make playoffs, and therefore not be able to get a chance to qualify for the major. So at the end of playoffs, as you can see here on the right side of the bracket, the top 4 teams at the end of playoffs will all get a spot at the Salt Lake City Major. I believe it's in May. Usually the spring majors in May. So yeah, and then you also get 6 invitational points as well. And those are spread out all the way down to 9th. You only don't get as high points if you get 10th. But ideally you want to be in that top 4 for points still. So yeah. Next, we're going to do all the APAC leagues. This is going to be a little more brief, right? Because these teams are just, a lot of them I either know nothing about or very little about. There's only a couple I want to talk about in a little more in depth. So I'm going to start with the Oceania League, basically the Australian League, because that's all who plays. So you have this 6 targets team. The only recognizable player to me is Nico, from previous years in the Australian scene. So yeah. Next, also from Challenger League, we have Barbie Boys, and they have Wettables, Bailey, Killerman, Walsh, President as their roster. So it's a Challenger League team. They're just better. And then Team Inos, again from Challenger League. And then we have Shy Academy, again from Challenger League. Rock LFO, I believe, again also from Challenger League. Like the Oceania League had like 4 or 5 Challenger League spots, because the just the APAC scene is just kind of cooked in general, right? There's like almost no org interest there, which is oftentimes why you see NA orgs pick up these Australian teams, because it's way cheaper for them to do that. And then we have Man Esports LFO. I feel like this team has been under this name forever now, Man Esports LFO. So they're still around. Their roster is pretty similar. Still Hunter, Scars, Pluto, Sharky, and Beers from last year. So now for Chiefs, they released their roster and they picked up definitely a roster that has like a lot more to prove in the Aussie scene, right? This is what many people I would consider a downgrade from their previous roster, right? Because their previous roster had like Jigsaw and some of the old Bliss guys. So yeah, Chiefs have Jake Kenna, Lunchbox, Neptune, Player, and Rayleigh's. Player and Rayleigh's both previously being with Enterprise. And I spelled Player's name wrong. Sorry. And then they still have Nate as head coach. And then we have Enterprise still with Bappin, Tuhan, and Brendo. And then they brought in Cairo and Jigsaw, who were previously, of course, with Chiefs. So definitely probably like good changes, because I feel like Jigsaw with Virtue retiring, Jigsaw is definitely like the best Australian player. I feel like most people would say either him, Tuhan, or Bappin. I've all seen them like pop off. So yeah, and then they brought in Mag as coach. So it's nice to see him back. If you don't know who Mag is, you might recognize the name Magnet, who was previously with Fnatic's Australian team for Siege, a player for the team when Fnatic was good at Siege, when they had their Australian team. That's how long it's been since Fnatic has been good at Siege. Ever since that team fell apart, when Fnatic has not been good at Siege, has not had a good Siege team. So it's definitely exciting to see him back in Siege as a coach now. So I'm kind of excited to see what this team can do, because I feel like they could, like, it's just so hard, right? Because they don't get to practice against any of the top teams. I feel like if Enterprise, was in a different region, for some reason, right? And they got to play against, the top teams from, EU, Brazil, or NA, like, consistently, they would get much better. But they just don't, right? Like, they'll make the events, but it's still, like, it's just not enough, because they just... All they normally play against is their Australian teams for the most part. Maybe some APAC teams. But, like, the quality of play there is just so much lower than it is in our big 3 regions, right? So I want to see them do well, and I hope they do well, but it's going to be hard, because, like, when they make the major, at least I expect them to be there. Of course, most people, are going to have them on the getting grouped side of things. So yeah, for Oceania League, there is no group stage. It's just straight playoffs, and the team that wins the grand final of the playoffs gets the major spot. So yeah, it'll be best of 3, I'm assuming. Double Elim best of 3. The team who wins gets the major spot. So yeah. Next we have the Asia League. Again, teams I just don't really know about, coming out of Challenger League. Dolphin Esport is one of them. Again, Unreal Nightmare. Don't really know much about these guys. Again, if you want to just if you're kind of for some reason interested in any of these teams, you can always just pause, read over the roster real quick, right? I know nothing about these players and what to expect of them, so I'm not going to say anything about them. So, next, another team from Challenger League, but I know a little bit about this team at least. This is basically the old Fury roster, but they got let go of, and now they're using the name 6-7. So, yeah, definitely like a solid team here. Definitely can give some teams probably a hard time in this league. So definitely one of the teams to look out for coming out of the Challenger League. And now we have the new Fury roster, and they've picked up some more younger up and coming players from their region. So I definitely think this will be an improvement for them from last year. Because really they're kind of just rebuilding, right? And then we have Soul's Heart. It's still the same as last year. I'm not sure about like the coaching staff, but this is what's listed. Daystar, they let go of Jogor and they brought in Bin Bin. So yeah, they have these guys are gunners. I think everyone knows that. But yeah, again, same with what I mentioned about the Enterprise earlier, where it's like they barely see international play, right? And they don't get to practice against those top level teams very often. So no one really expects them to ever reach that next level. And next, we have Elevate, and they've gone back to having the Asian roster. So yay, we don't have to hate watch Elevate anymore because they don't have a Brazilian import team after they got their ass kicked last year by the Asian teams and barely did anything and got embarrassed. So yeah, it's nice to see them go back to the Asian team, and they've brought in players who have previously played on other teams in the Asia League and kind of mix them together. And they also have Hysterics as one of their subs, which is interesting to me because I totally thought he was done with Siege. And he was, previously with, if anyone remembers this team, Arrowwolf, I believe was their name. Most notable, in my opinion, for, their performance at the Japan Pro League Finals, where they knocked out Giants Gaming out the first round, which was really funny. So definitely like legacy wise, one of the best players from his country, Hysterics. And it'd be kind of interesting to see him play again. But yeah, good on Elevate for bringing back the all Asian team. And then now of course we have Weibo, exactly the same as last year. This is like the one APAC team that I feel like everyone can say, like, if there's an APAC team that has a chance to win a major, this is the one. They are competitive and they show up against good teams, even if they don't always beat them. They will always give good teams a hard time, and they are very scary to play against. I would imagine for other teams internationally. So like, I absolutely expect Weibo to be making the major and being quite competitive at the major. So again, just like the Oceania League, no group stage, just a straight playoff bracket with single with double elim. And the one difference here is the teams that make the grand final both get a spot at the major. The only difference here is the SI points. You get more SI points if you win. So, yeah, two SI or major spots up for grabs here in the Asia League. And then now we have the APAC North League. So basically Japan and Korea League. One quick thing about the Challenger League this year for APAC North, you can really see how bad the Korean like player pool is um, in the APAC North now. I don't think there was a single um, Korean player in the APAC North Challenge League this year. I think they were all Japanese, every team. Not a single Korean player. So now we have the first team here. Can you be my enemy from CL? So yeah, they funny name here. They have a guy called JV9 or 63, which is like just kind of funny because we have a JV92 from Team Liquid, which we'll get into earlier, and everyone knows JV92 if you watch CG Sports. So it's just kind of funny. And then we have the XE36 Enterforce E36 roster. Um, they they are still around, and then Kinotrope Gaming. They picked up a couple players who previously were with CAG in their previous years. Gator and Gatorada are recognizable if you've been watching CAG for some time. And then ex PSG Talon. So yeah, PSG Talon are gone, but they are still sticking around in the league, and they made a couple changes to their roster as well. So now they have Demick and Harper. Demick was previously on Firax, and then Harper, I believe, was previously with the Cloud9, which also I believe eventually became Firax as well, or D plus. Honestly, it's been a while. It was one of those teams, um, but yeah, and then they still have Rider, Soldier, and Yunsong. So this is one of the few Korean teams left, and then we have Scars. They are still keeping it the same from what I know. I do have Tyope listed twice here. That's on me, because yeah, I wasn't sure on their whole roster, so I'm not exactly sure what's happening with Scars fifth. Maybe they updated it by now, and I forgot to check. But yeah, they're pretty much keeping it the same. Besides that, and then we have D plus Kia. They're sticking with the Brazilian team, so the hate watch continues. They picked up Muzi in place of Bullet, and they also have committed to now getting the Brazilian head coach as well. So I do think this will be better than last year's team now that they've committed to getting a Brazilian coach along with having the Brazilian players. Because last year was weird because they had the Brazilian team, but they had the Korean coach slash analyst, which didn't really make sense to me because it's how do they communicate, right? Um, and I think they had timeouts in English, but only some of the players understood English. So it's they had the timeout in English, and then that information would have to be regurgitated in Portuguese. So definitely strange. So yeah, now that they have the Brazilian coach, they shouldn't have that problem anymore, which is good for the team. And they have Muzi, who in years past has proven as one of the best players in Brazil, right? SI winner in 2021. So definitely, a lot to prove now. He's definitely had a pretty big fall off considering he's gone to go play in the Brazilian, or not the fucking APAC North League, from the Brazilian leagues. So from the most competitive region to one of our least competitive regions. So yeah, and then we have CAG, of course. They have Arcali, DD, Chibisu, Shuri, and Anaton. So same team. They just recently added a coach literally a day or two ago. I forgot to add it. His name is Sparky, I believe. European coach. So it looks like now DD seems to be a full-time player for this team, which is definitely interesting because I thought they would eventually, put him back on coaching and just replace him with one of the other, Japanese players. Maybe add, more firepower or something, right? I felt this team would pick up like a Rec or a Nina or something, just to like really up the firepower of this team, because I feel like I feel like DD is a good mind for this team, but in some of those moments, this team could definitely use the firepower. Not that they don't have it, they definitely do. Shuri is the GOAT of Japan, um, but yeah, uh, I do expect them to be contending for the major spot though, along with D plus. And then we have Fearx, who, yeah, I don't really know what they're doing. I believe they did announce their roster changes, and I believe they did add Misa, NL, and Sets. Um, can't remember if they announced their fifth or not. If they did, I forgot to add it. And I'm assuming, right, and I didn't change it here. I'm assuming Nova is moving to their head coaching position um, after Dark left and went to Virtus Pro. So, and I didn't update that here, but I'm assuming he's just their head coach now. So, yeah, now this is one of our, I think, one of two Korean teams left in the whole league, including T2 in APAC North. So, definitely rough days for the Korean scene. And it was crazy to see the Fearx like let go of like, yes, they lost their coach, but they also let go of literally their entire team outside of Woogie Man. Um, so yeah, and of course, again here, like the other APAC regions, again they just no group stage. They just have a double elim playoff bracket, and the winner gets the major spot. So now on the South American League, back to where stuff gets good. And honestly, I love South America League. It's probably the most passionate. It gets like the most org support, and it feels like the only league that's like kind of like actually growing, might be growing financially, right? Because there's like actual interest from like pretty big orgs, right, to invest in the T2 scene, right? And as we'll see here, first we have Ints, um, that moved up from Challenger League, and right, it's not like Ints only picked up the team after they made it out of Challenger League. Ints picked up this team when they were in Challenger League, and they qualified to Pro League as Ints. So that's really nice to see, that investment into the T2, and not just after, just choosing the team that makes T1, right? You see that investment into them before they get there, and I feel like that's really important um, for an esports scene to grow, right? You have to see that investment in the lower tier scenes um, before you can expect it into tier 1. So yeah, they're going in with some players from previous Los rosters, as well as they got STK, who was previously with Loud, as well as Raps. I feel like everyone's seen these players before. It's kind of a mix of some previous Brazilian teams who haven't done so well in recent history. So yeah, we'll kind of just see how they do. This team doesn't really have expectations, but it's also it's just nice to see Ints back in the league after they previously had left. And then we have Imperial Esports. Again, another Brazilian org that also picked up this team from Tier 2, led by Sexy Cake. Feel like everyone knows Sexy Cake. If you've watched the Brazilian scenes, Sexy Cake is basically like the Packer of Brazil at this point, where he's like, he kind of owns the T2 scene. He hasn't had a stable tier 1 team in the past few years, and then he always wins Challenger League. So yeah, they have, again, it's just a mix of a bunch of previous tier 1 players. They got Florio, previously Black Dragons, Machina, previously MIBR, Mitrix, previously on Fluxo, Sexy Cake, previously ENX, and then Yex is the only guy I can't exactly remember what team he was on. It might have also been ENX. And then yeah, next we have Los, They haven't announced their roster yet, so this is what everyone anticipates it to be. The only player everyone knows is certainly on this team is Dark Eyes. Um, and then they are supposedly picking up Dash, Dafo, Nuxka, and Perez. Dash, of course, previously with Wildcard. Dafo, previously with Team Liquid. Nuxka, previously with Black Dragons. And Perez, previously with Loud. Um, and then they were also potentially rumored to be picking up Nears at one point, but that is not happening anymore. He's still with D Plus. That's why his name is there. And then they also have are supposedly getting Hugzord as their head coach. So now we have Black Dragons. They have replaced Ask with Lenda, and that is the only change they have made. Again, kind of just a team with middling expectations. Like this, Black Dragons are always like a dark horse in the Brazilian league. Like they have some games where it's like, oh wow, this team could actually be good, and then other teams where shit looks bad. Um, so yeah. Also, I still hate their logo. So their logo change is just terrible. Um, Next we have Loud. They've added Gabu, Stemp, and Resets. Um, so definitely don't really know much about Gabu, and then Stemp and Resets were both previously with Elevate in the Asia League, and of course Resets more notably for his time on Team Liquid though. Um, so I definitely like, Resets. I feel like is a good addition to pretty much any roster in Brazil. He's always been quite a consistently good player. Gabu and Stemp, of course, are the players coming into this team who have lots to prove, especially with Loud. Big org, right? They're not. They picked up the team last year, and the team they picked up last year was just not good. They didn't make any events after the team they picked up ended up getting top 4 at SI. The next year, yeah, they went on and they just weren't very good. Which I kind of saw the writing on the wall for that. Honestly, their SI run to me was kind of just, I don't know what happened. It was kind of just a miracle run, to be honest, really. Um, but yeah, definitely like org expectations. Though I feel like you have to be under a lot of pressure on this team, right? Because Loud have one of the partner spots in Brazil, something very coveted to these Brazilian orgs. Um, and a lot of expectations to do well. But I just I don't know how well this team can truly do against some of like the big proven juggernauts as we'll get into, right? And then NIP last year, a team that was kind of on the come up. I felt like at the start of the year, but then they kind of just like plateaued and got stuck at that top 12, top 8 range of teams in the world, not in Brazil, in the world. So it's not really bad, but it's not really like great considering the start to the year they had, right? Like they look like last at the start of the year they look like they were going to be like, oh, this team they got top 8 at EWC and it was like, oh, this team is going to get better. And then the next event comes around and they didn't do any better. And then again, next event comes around and then they did even worse. So then I was like, okay, yeah, this team definitely needed changes, and they had a big choking problem last year. Like they were awful when like it came to closing out games. They against any team that was like remotely decent, they would choke against. It felt like in any like high pressure situation. So definitely like needed a change here. They got rid of Cons, who I think was their IGL, though I'm not certain on that. And they brought in Bassetto, and then the rest of the team is staying the same. So I definitely this team having a roster change, because they definitely needed it, because they definitely had mental issues. Um, so yeah, I'm excited to see how this team will actually do this year, because I definitely think they can make a splash um, amongst like the other big teams in the league. Next, of course, FaZe Clan. Everyone knows who they are. Back-to-back SI winners, best team in the world, maybe best team in history. now. Um, so yeah, I mean the expectations are qualify for the major, win the major. Um, that's really it. That's all I can say. Um, Fluxo W7M. They have swapped out Volps for cons, so I'm not sure if that means this team will slow down a little because Volps was previously their IGL, right? And Volps was definitely like a very aggressive player, and the teams he IGL'd were always very aggressive. And if anyone watched this Fluxo W7M team previously, um, I think everyone knows like how like aggressive this team was. Um, so I still think this team will be very good, even with losing Volps, because it's like this is. I think this is a good change though, because like Volps is definitely like statistically, I think he's a better player than Cons. But I feel like bringing in Cons like Fluxo W7M, they want to change like the identity of this team a little because um, I think that's what they wanted. Um, but we'll see. Also, because I'm not sure. Some roster changes, a lot. Well, not some. A lot of roster changes just happen because of like the economy in Siege is just not being good, right? Like pretty much every team just has less money, so contracts just got smaller, and there's less money going around in even the big teams, right? Like a lot of many teams um, made these changes because of just money, um, because they just had less money and they couldn't afford to keep players. So it could have also been a change like that, right? I should have mentioned that previously. It was like a lot of changes happened because money wise things are not going so well in Siege esports in general, and a lot of players flip teams to um, kind of just reset contracts because the longer a player is with a team, the more expensive their contract typically gets, right? So yeah, and I still expect this team to be quite competitive, though. I think they've been. I always think they're fun to watch. At least the previous iterations were. So I'm not sure how this one will exactly do, but I still expect them to be good. Um, so yeah, now we have Furia. They're doing big rebuild here around Herds. Um, so thanks to Intero's podcast with Felipox the other day, we know that Furia, they wanted to re-sign um, their previous team, but they felt like, you know, they weren't, they wanted to be like the main focus of like Furia's, Brazil division basically, but they just weren't. Furia put more focus into Counter Strike, of course, and their league, their like football team. I don't know what they're called. I think it's like the Kings League team. I don't know what they're called. Um, but yeah, Furia just are putting their money elsewhere. Um, in their Brazil division, and their money and their like focus. Um, and it's not seeing the Siege team as much. And yeah, they said they didn't really like that. Whereas with Liquid, they felt like with Liquid they were like the staple of Liquid's Brazil division, right? They Liquid's Siege is Liquid Brazil, so that's why they went. And he also said that Herds, the decision to replace Herds was going to happen whether they stayed with Furia or not. So apparently they just felt like after SI or even before SI that they wanted to make a change no matter what, and that their two options that they were going to pick up, they were between their Maya and Loira, and they ended up going with Maya, who was already with Liquid. So yeah, but anyways, we'll get to Liquid in a sec. We are talking about Fury here, but they kind of their stories are very intertwined now because of basically um, the Furia roster, the previous Furia roster has went to Liquid, so now they still have Herds, and he's kind of building a new project here, right? So they got Loira. I really like the addition of Loira, of course. Um, another very aggressive player along with Herds. And then same with Volps, right? They add Volps, who I'm assuming will IGL this team, another very aggressive player. This might be the most aggressive team of all time. I'm not gonna lie, like this team could be crazy. Um, and then they also added Bakizera, or Bakizera. Um, he was, kind of touted as like the the best up and coming player in Brazil last year among like the Brazilian players. So he's definitely got a lot to kind of prove with this team now because he's getting his first like chance with a big org, um, that has a partner spot and everything. And they also added Diaz, who, just a good player. He'll help the with the structure and the backline of this team. I'll imagine. So yeah, definitely I think this team will be good, though it may take some time, a little bit of time, but we'll see. I think this team will be very fun to watch though. And now, of course, we have Team Liquid. They picked up the ex Furia roster, and then they've swapped out Hertz for Maya. Um, but yeah, so definitely huge change for Liquid, and now I feel like Liquid definitely have a roster that's going to be competing for trophies for years now, for really, or however long this roster wants to go for. So yeah, I really like this change. Um, and I think this team will continue to just be fun to watch as long as they stick around. So yeah, for groups, definitely most exciting because Brazil being the most competitive region, like the groups are going to be the most interesting, right? We got FaZe and Liquid in the same group, and then we got Furia, Flux to be 7 of them in the same group as well. Um, so yeah, again, groups here are best of ones. Top 4 teams in each group will make playoffs, and the 5th place teams in each group will be eliminated from major contention. And then again, similar to EU, the first place team in each group gets a bye in the upper bracket, second and third make upper bracket, and then fourth start down the lower, and then the top 4 teams coming out of groups will make the major. And then also, yeah, get their respective SI points. And then lastly, and certainly not least, we have the North American League. First, coming out of Challenger League, we have Trev Mack and Co. Definitely like the biggest upset probably from Challenger League this year, where they beat out the previous Cruelty roster. It was a very fun match to watch, that's for sure. Um, and yeah, I'm kind of just some of these tier 2 teams. I'm kind of just excited to play, right? Because this team, they really have no expectations, right? It's nice to see Trev Mack make the league because he's been a big tier 2 grinder for quite a long time, and there's a lot of players here who quickly, they're kind of like tier 3 players, right? A lot of these players I've never even seen play in tier 2 before, so they kind of just they qualified to Challenger League and then they shot right up to Pro League in their first Challenger League stage together. So definitely a crazy story for this team coming out of Challenger League, but no real expectations for them in Pro League. Besides, just kind of have fun and enjoy your time in Pro League. Really, I mean, that's really what I hope from this team. Give us some good games. That's what I want for these Challenger League teams. Really, really, in all the leagues. That's what I want from all the Challenger Leagues. Be fun, be competitive, give us some good games. You surprise us maybe, or don't surprise us. Be bad, but I don't want them to be bad. It always sucks. It's like watching. It's like watching a Challenger League team versus like FaZe Clan is the whole atomic bomb versus a dying ant kind of thing. It's sometimes it can be really hard to watch. And that kind of sucks when the games are just uncompetitive. And next, of course, we have Foot Locker's finest, and of course, as the making of this video, all these Challenger League teams that I'm talking about that don't have orgs may or may not get picked up by an org, right? But as of currently, recording this, there is no org that some of these teams could have that we know of, or that I know of. So yeah, and who knows? Maybe in the making of this video, a team might get signed to an org while I'm recording this, and I could open, Twitter right after I open this and be like, "Oh, this team just got signed to an org," and it's like, "Wow, all right." Right after I make the video, of course, that has happened before. So, yeah. So again, the Packer, the owner of NAT2, qualifies to Pro League once again. He's back, and definitely a more recognizable Tier 2 NA team here, right? They got Packer, Bino, Mike W. finally getting a shot in Pro League, so happy for him. And then Bapulser, Volsper, and Silo. So yeah, and then we have Five Fears, who were previously JJ and Co., and they actually got an org. A smaller org at that, but hey, they got an org. And I actually really like the change they have here. They brought in Forrest, who I think will really help, bring some structure and some leadership to this team, and definitely make them a better team than they were in the past. And I feel like this 5 years roster is like could be a sneaky team in Pro League this year, in NA. They could also just end up being bad. So, who knows? But I feel like this team has some potential to give us some upsets. So, yeah. Next we have Cloud9. Again, infamous for not putting a lot of money into their NA Siege, and it kind of shows here again, right? They're just picking up a lot of kind of like the scraps of previous, last place tier 1 rosters and a couple of the top tier 2 teams, right? It's cool to see Center get a spot in Pro League, right? Him and his brother now both playing in Pro League, his brother being Surf on Shopify. And then, yeah, Eddie is still sticking around, and they got Focal, who some may recognize previously from playing with SSG Academy. They got Kixrow, previously with Luminosity, another org infamous for, not paying very much in Siege. And then they have Uzi, not Uzi the streamer, more Uzi, but I think it's pronounced Uzi. So yeah, another just pretty long time NAT2 player. At this point, again, I don't really expect much from this team. If they're competitive, cool. If they're not, I mean, it clearly shows that Cloud9, if you want to have a good Siege team, you need to invest more money into getting better players, or proven players. So next, we have one of the most exciting additions to NA here. They're coming in and replacing Oxygen, by the way. Oxygen are no longer in Siege, so now we have 100 Thieves, and their roster will be Spirits, Yaga, Pamba coming back from retirement, Gomez and Adam, with Keezy as the head coach, so 3/5 of OXG. They picked up Pamba from retirement, and then they got Spirits previously with DZ. Spirits was also apparently offered a spot on Wildcard, but he ended up picking the spot on this team. And this team, and everyone said it, it's very reminiscent of the old XSET roster, right? And this team will constantly get comparisons to that XSET team until they are able to prove, that they're not the XSET team. Or maybe they do want to be that team. Who knows? That old XSET team wasn't awful or anything. They actually had some pretty good performances at events, but they never won anything. So, we'll see how this team does. I want them to do well. I want this org to do well, because it'll be fun to watch, that's for sure. And I want Pambazu to do well after his exit last year. So yeah. Next we have SR, one of the only teams not making changes. The only really change they added Tisius as their I think that's how it's pronounced, Tisius, as a assistant coach / analyst to the team. So that's cool. I heard his work is really good. Um, Gets a lot of praise. So yeah, I mean that's more support staff is always good. But yeah, Shopify, no changes, and yeah, this team, everyone expects them to be, kind of a world beater. Really, that's was their expectations last year. They never really met those expectations. So maybe with extra support staff, that will help them reach those expectations. Um, and now we have wild card. Um, Dash, of course, he had his whole homesickness arc, and he decided he wanted to go back home to Brazil to play there. So wildcard made a big splash, and they got Adrian, previously with world number 2 Team Secret. So yeah, I really like the addition. Though the big question is like the fit, right? Because like they're replacing Dash with Adrian, and Adrian doesn't play the exact roles Dash does. They both do play that more supportive role, but Adrian's not really a shield guy. Where Dash, they had him on that that shield role, that shield bitch role. Um, and now from what I've heard, Spiker is going to be on that shield role, so definitely like a big change up in roles there because if Spiker definitely likes having a gun, I don't really see him as a shield guy. Um, but I really trust like Lagonis here. I felt Lagonis last year, like I thought he did some like really good work with his team last year. Really helped bring them to like another level. Um, and Wildcard were definitely one of my favorite teams to watch last year. Um, so yeah, I think this team on paper is better. Um, but we'll see how the roles shake up here. But I really like the addition of Adrian. I think it'll be really good for them. Next, we have M80, another team where this is one of like the main teams where we can look at as the financials affecting the roster. They even said after SI, Fabian himself went and said, "We're not making any changes. We're continuing with the roster." But of course, they ended up making a change, not because of they wanted a different player, in particular, but they just either they couldn't come to like a contract agreement with Kino basically. Um, so Kino ended up leaving. Um, and they got Ashen, which honestly I feel like is probably one of the best case scenarios for this team. I really like the pick of Ashen. A very vocal player. I feel like, as most people know, from his antics. Um, but not just like vocal, as in like he'll yell at the other team and trash talk the other team. Like his actual like you know in-game comms like are very strong and very helpful for a team like M80. So I really like the change. And Ashen is kind of like he'll kind of play anything, right? Which is kind of nice. He's kind of good at all the things. Like he'll play shields. He'll play like the weird cheesy shit. Um, and he can also gun on like your more standard picks as well, right? So I think this is a really good change for M80 given the circumstances with Kino's contract and him leaving. So yeah, I really like the change here, and I'm excited to watch them this upcoming week. So next we have SSG. This is one of the teams that has not announced their roster, so this is this is the rumored roster. Don't even know who their coach is going to be, because I think it was rumored before as Vivid, but of course Cloud9 announced Vivid as their coach, so it won't be Vivid. But yeah, now Raid believes this sounds it's like so goofy to me because the whole team is like on paper it's a downgrade, right? Of course their previous team, but SSG. This is again another team here clearly affected by money, right? They could not afford to pay for their previous team anymore, so they kind of had to, um, you know, downgrade in terms of contracts here, um, to a more. This is definitely like an exciting team. Like I think this is genuinely like a fun team to watch. Like a lot of players here, who are definitely fun to watch. And oh my, Raid Bullies, bro. Raid Bullies on a pro league team feels like a fever dream because I really, I really hope he he's he's changed it up because like playing ranked with this guy before, and like I've ran into him on solo queue, when he's played on console like countless times, and he's like, oh my god, he was so fucking this is so annoying, bro. He's just so goofy and kind of just like kind of annoying, to be honest, at least to me, but not like a bad guy or anything, but god, sometimes he would just piss me off. So I hope he's like not like that anymore, because that obviously wouldn't be great for a professional environment. Um, but definitely definitely like a fun team here. Um, and yeah, they also have Aiden Tags, another uh, recognizable Jinxieverse player that I've also had to deal with on the old ranked queues. And then they also have Dream, who I feel like Dream could have made it onto. I don't know how Dream doesn't get a shot on like a I wouldn't say like, but yeah, I mean that's how it is. That's how I have to put it. I don't know how Dream doesn't get a shot on like a more proven team, I'll say. Um, and because I feel like he deserves it. And then yeah, they have the other rival. This was the rival that was with DZ previously, and then they got Giddy as well, another pretty well proven tier 2 NA player, who's been around Pro League now for like the past year or two. So yeah, and then I don't really know who their coach is going to be. So yeah, but this is the rumored SSG roster, but nothing is confirmed. Things could change here. And then we have Dark Zero, again, one of the more exciting rosters coming into NA this year. They kept NJR, and now they have like the SSG core. They got Newers, J9, and Faults, and then the SSG coaching staff, which I really like, call out. And the SSG coaching staff in general, I think they're really great. And then they've also added Kino, who I also think is just another really good addition. So I think this DZ roster is a major like step up in improvement from their previous roster from last year. So I'm really excited to watch this DZ team play, and also change in playstyle too, because it feels like DZ's playstyle was like you know I don't know, it just wasn't that fun to watch for a really long time, and I feel like with this team it'll definitely be a lot more fun. So yeah, again, here are the groups heading into the NAL this for kickoff. And again, best of ones for groups. And the number one team in groups will be get a bye in the upper bracket. 2 and 3 get upper bracket. Fourth place get lower bracket, and then fifth in each group again eliminated. And then the top 4 teams again will get a major spot at the end of the playoffs. So that's all. I believe, yeah, that's all I want to talk about for kickoff for now. If there's other things that I want to talk about that I haven't really thought of yet, then I will make another video on that. But yeah, for now, I think next time I'll be talking about Siege. It will probably be about the major, because as I would kind of like to make update vids about the leagues each week, but during that time, when the leagues are going, it will be like my final exams season, so it will be kind of hard to do like league recap videos every week, especially for every league. Maybe I could do it for like maybe just a couple, like if I stuck to just the top 3, Brazil, EU, and NA. Maybe that, if people would like to see that, I could do that, but definitely can't do like every league like I can here, because right now I did thankfully have enough time to sit down here today and do a more lengthy conversation about everything. So yeah, we're kind of at the end here, so if you enjoyed, feel free to let me know. And if there's anything you want to see me talk about, whether that's Siege or other things too, I'm very willing to talk about other things other than Siege, but I just really like talking about Siege. So yeah, That will be all, and have a good day.